Got to get twitchy to 3 o'clock. Yeah. All right, calling to order the WTA Board of Directors meeting for Thursday, April 2nd, 2026. Vicki, please start with roll, please.
Yes, Board Member Buchanan.
Here.
Cotton.
Here.
Hawkinson.
Here.
Fortice.
Here.
Lockbach.
Here.
Lilliquist looks like it's absent. Lund.
Here.
Nystrom. Here. Stewart.
Here.
And Darwin is absent. Thank you.
Michael is on vacation. All right, item C, public comment. Each speaker is allowed a maximum of 3 minutes to address the board on any topic relevant to WTA. Is there anyone online who would like to unmute and address the board? Please do so now.
I would like to. Hello, my name is Owen Beckley Collier, and I'm a student at Western. The bus is my primary mode of transportation, and while I greatly appreciate the service that WTA provides, I think there are significant improvements that could be made to make the buses faster, more frequent, and more reliable. I'm strongly in support of the locally preferred alternative for rapid transit because it would involve increased frequencies, allow buses to get through lights faster, give buses priority on certain streets, and make the experience of riding the bus more pleasant with better stop design. I'm speaking to you as a transit rider, but also as one of the student leaders for Western's Students for Climate Action Club. With Western's WAWU Union and Q's Club, we have released an open letter in support of the locally preferred alternative with over 600 signatures from students and community members. Improving bus service would take cars off the road, reduce emissions, and make our streets more safe and livable. To make transit more reliable and to make Whatcom County more sustainable, I ask that you pass the locally preferred alternative for rapid transit. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Is there anyone else online who would like to unmute and address the board?
I would love to. Hi, thank you for hosting this public comment opportunity. My name is Kaya Olson and I'm a student at Western. As a daily bus rider, I appreciate WTA's current service immensely, but I believe there are many opportunities for expansion and improvement. Due to this, I wholeheartedly support this LPA as a means of addressing our growing need for reliable and accessible transit to connect our community and further sustainability goals. Several other student organizers and I, as Owen mentioned, wrote an open letter in support of this LPA that now has over 600 signatures. I strongly urge you to listen to the voices of your constituents and approve the LPA. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Anyone else online who would like to unmute and address the board?
Hello. My name is Vincent Lee. I'm with Kimley Horn. Sorry. Yeah, we noticed like the work that WTA does like with the county and with especially with locally preferred rapid transit routes, and we would like to join these board meetings to learn more about the future work that you are going to be doing and potentially seek partnership in the future.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else online that would like to unmute?
Hello. I would like to give public comment. My name is Ukiah Lemaster. I live in the Cordata neighborhood and I'm a newer bus rider. I try to ride the bus as often as possible, but unfortunately where I live, it takes over an hour to get into Bellingham via the bus, whereas taking the car is closer to 15 minutes. I'm in strong support of the LPA because it will increase ridership and decrease the time in which it takes to ride the bus, which will make it significantly easier for me to take the bus more often. And I'm just here to show support for the LPA and urge the board to vote to approve. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else online? Go ahead and unmute.
Hi, I would like to make public comment.
Yes, go ahead.
My name is Margaret McDaniel, and I know we've heard from quite a few students so far. I just wanted to give my 2 cents as a young person who is actually not didn't move here for university. I know quite a few people in my community and neighbors of mine who, like me, are younger people who moved here more out of necessity for work. Um, and many of us, especially over the winter, experienced a lot of car troubles and have been relying fairly heavily on the WTA services, which have been great, but in looking at that, there's definitely a strong support for your LPA plan, making it more accessible, a wider range of service. And like Yukaya was saying, from where we are, it takes about an hour to get into town. Um, and quite a few of my neighbors work in town and rely exclusively on the bus system. So any sort of improvement to that would genuinely be life-changing for a lot of people here. So I just wanted to show my support for voting yes on that. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Is there anyone else online that would like to unmute? Go ahead now. All right, anyone in person that would like to address the board? Yes.
Yes, thank you. My name is Jamin Agosti. I'm on the board of Colshan Community Land Trust in Walkenville, Bellingham, and here also to speak in favor of supporting the LPA today. Just want to talk a little bit about why we think this is important from both the transportation and housing perspective. Colshan Community Land Trust does a lot to build housing in your communities, and it takes an incredible amount of money to build that type of housing. We're talking $300,000 on average per unit in state, local, and federal subsidies to build an affordable housing unit. And the cost of housing is only one part of the affordability puzzle. Transportation is the second biggest factor in our communities. Right now, on average, it costs the average American $12,000 a year to own a vehicle. After housing, that's the biggest household expense. And reducing that cost is the best dollar for dollar investment we can make on tackling our affordability crisis in our community. With dollar amounts that just are tiny in comparison to the dollar amounts it takes to to develop housing. Colshan Community Land Trust was not a housing developer, but the housing problem became so acute that we became a housing developer because we just couldn't get homes under trust quickly enough. And funding this LPA is something that can help our homeowners and community members that are really struggling tackle their budget issues. From a transportation perspective, this is accretive to the network that we're building right now and all the time and money that our communities spend in making our transportation network as efficient as possible. As you know, Bellingham and many of your communities outside of Bellingham are putting tons of dollars into options to allow people to get around the community outside of a car. And in communities with really good transit service, those trips start or end with a bus trip. And we know that when we get service down to 10-minute headways, it's like a psychological switch and people stop worrying about when the next bus is coming. They just go to a bus stop and the next bus is on average 5 minutes away. That's a huge benefit and a huge improvement on ridership. As I'm sure many of you in the room have heard, people see empty buses and they're like, why are we running these empty buses around the community? This is a way to fill those buses. We would really like to see the buses full. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Anyone else in person that would like to address the board? All right, item D, executive session. The board will now meet in executive session for an update on the potential acquisition of real estate as allowed by RCW 42.30.110(1)B. The board will be in executive session for approximately 10 minutes until 8:20 a.m. Okay, I call the regular meeting back to order. Item E1, consideration of resolution number 6369-26, authorizing entry into amendment of real estate purchase and sale agreement and waiving feasibility contingency.
Yes. So this is as to the Northland Peaceful lot. The board had authorized a purchase and sale agreement. This amends that, allows us to waive the due diligence. Remains one thing to finalize some, as we'll be assuming leases, finalize some terms with that. The board will have one more touch point, excuse me, with that as part of the purchase and sale agreement, the board has to improve our ability to close. So if the lease can't figure that out, then we come back and have the opportunity not to close and keep our earnest money on that. With that said, we don't foresee any issues with getting to the leases and getting those filled or getting those completed. So with that, we respectfully request that the board approve of the resolution.
I'll move that we approve resolution 369-26. I will second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Questions or comments? All those in favor of approving the resolution, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, that passes. Thank you so much. Thank you. E2, consideration of rapid transit locally preferred alternative and MOU with City of Bellingham related to implementing LPA. Tim and Hayden.
Okay, so this item has been before you many times before, so we're excited to bring I guess what you call the grand finale here to approve the locally preferred alternative for the rapid transit project. So before I hand it over to Hayden, I just wanted to remark a couple things. One, this project has obviously evolved over the 3 years that we've been working on it. So a lot of work has gone into the background that you don't necessarily see in your packet, but there are now reams of paper that we've created as part of this project, both through the phase one, where we determined that it was feasible to do a project, up to the present moment where now we're talking about the specific implementation strategies and how we work together with the city to implement the project. So that's kind of what you're going to be seeing here today. I will say that the partnership as well with the city has evolved with the project and it's strengthened over that course of time. And we see this, then it's not just a WTA project, but it's a city and a Bellingham project as well that provides benefits for the city, for housing, but also for the broader community. We talked about that in terms of people that come into the community will benefit from this project, whether you live in the county, whether you live in Hubbardson or Linden, you're going to benefit from this project. So we see this as a very strong project for WTA, City of Bellingham, and the community as a whole. So with that, just want to hand it over to Hayden to talk about some of the details of the locally preferred alternative. Before I do that, I did want to mention that there has been one change to the packet. We are removing from consideration the memorandum of understanding at this point. The city needed more time to review that document. We think the content is going to remain essentially the same, but there's some language changes that we're going to be reviewing. And so we wanted to make sure you had time to review that before we just popped it in front of you and asked you to approve it. So we're removing that specific piece from consideration.
Our goal is to bring that back on the 16th.
16th, we'll bring it back to you on the 16th. So yeah, it should be ready by then. So we'll send it back to you in advance of the meeting. But here's, we'll be asking for your approval of the locally preferred. So with that, Dave.
Yeah, thanks, Tim, and thanks to the board for having us this morning. Apologies to everyone behind me for not looking at you. But so today we're going to go over our rapid transit locally preferred alternative. I'll touch a little bit on the project background, what the LPA goal-line features consist of, estimated time savings and costs, and next steps in the process. And I'll also say we did this work, as Tim mentioned, in coordination with the city, but also with consultants that we worked with. And Stephanie Herstein with Transpo Group is also on the call. So if there's any questions about specific technical methodology or anything like that, Stephanie can help us out as well. So with the project background, as Tim mentioned, the rapid transit study started a few years ago, started in 2023, and was really a way to study the feasibility of what bus rapid transit could look like in the city of Bellingham. And so the feasibility study was essentially just judging
is something like a bus rapid transit system even feasible? Can we move forward with the project, and does the street landscape and land use characteristics warrant that high level of frequency? So from there, we conducted some outreach for find alternatives. In the feasibility study, we were really only focused on 2 alternative corridors. That was a combination of the green and blue GO lines, and the gold GO lines is the second alternative. From there in 2025, we came to the WTA board with the preliminary locally preferred alternative, which really looked at, is this project going to pursue the full bus rapid transit build out, which requires a lot of financial resources. It requires a lot of planning and could potentially take about 8 to 10 years. That also relies heavily on federal funding as well. And at that time last year, federal funding was really kind of up in the air. Everyone was wondering if it was going to be realistic to rely on. From there, the board and Bellingham City Council both agreed that moving forward with an enhanced GO line model rather than a full BRT system would be the most approachable. And so what I mean by that is the enhanced GO line model allowed us to study the GO line system as a whole and look at individual treatments, and we could have a more incremental implementation of that rather than a full planning corridor for like a traditional bus rapid transit system. So that takes us to this year. Today, we are before you with our locally preferred alternative. I'll talk a lot more detail on what that means. We will also be going to the Bellingham City Council with the same document for adoption. So as I mentioned, the study area here with our enhanced GO line model is looking at our current GO line system. So that is the green, the gold, the blue, and the plum. It serves most, if not all, major destinations around Bellingham. The green line serves the Northwest Ave corridor between Bellingham Station and Cordata. The gold is our highest ridership GO line route, the single route. Goes up Cornwall, Alabama, serves the Barclay Village, Urban Village. It goes up to Bellis Fair and connects to Cordata Station. The blue line mainly serves Western Campus. And with the service changes going into effect in 26, will also be extended up to Lakeway and turn around at on Lincoln. And then the plum line serves the Lakeway corridor. So why is this project needed? The big one is to support future growth. That's not necessarily just residential growth, but also employment growth as well. The city of Bellingham in their current comprehensive plan that was just adopted identified transit-oriented development as an infill growth tool. And so this project will act as kind of an informing tool in establishing what those transit corridors might look like and what areas can be upzoned with higher density residential and commercial growth. But it's also helping realize mode shift. And so it will allow people to start using certain trips with transit rather than relying on like a car, or it will also expand transportation networks, allowing people to expand that first mile, last mile where they might have biked or walked to the bus. If the bus is more frequent, more reliable, that will allow people to kind of expand that network. And then, as I mentioned, it'll increase reliability. So these treatments that we'll talk about help reduce total runtime along the corridors and increase that reliability. So as kind of an example, just looking at our current GO lines are on 15-minute frequency. So for an example, if you look at a route that takes 50 minutes, over an hour, including a 10-minute layover time, that takes 4 buses and 4 bus drivers to maintain that 15-minute frequency. And so that's 240 total minutes of driver time. Now, if we introduce 10 minutes of congestion along that corridor, that means a 20% time penalty for riders. It means that WTA has to introduce one additional bus and one additional bus driver to that route just in order to maintain that 15-minute level of frequency. And I think it's also important to note that there would also be a 20% emissions increase along that individual route as well, introducing an additional bus. So how can we provide more frequency and more reliable service? The LPA explores treatment types in order to help reduce that overall runtime. So I'll go over kind of the individual treatment types, but we're looking at spot treatments like bus stop islands. We are looking at improved technology with transit signal priority along each route. And then we're looking at targeted roadway design changes. And all of these, again, in coordination with the City of Bellingham, we've developed what we think is a pretty implementable package of projects, which will ultimately lead to people being able to ride the bus easier, faster, more reliably. So what will this project accomplish? Ultimately, the intent is more people will want to ride, more people will be able to replace the occasional trip every so often, and then start to form those habits over time. This supports that increase in development, higher density in housing and employment. And it'll make transit an even more attractive option when streets are congested. So the intent is when people are stuck in traffic with their single occupancy vehicle, riding the bus will be a more convenient alternative. In addition to those, it also helps implement the City of Bellingham's goals and policies with the Bellingham Plan. With the most recent update, we're looking here on the right with the transportation modal hierarchy. You can see on the right side in the orange, that is a new modal hierarchy that was just introduced in 2025. And what that does is along transit corridors, it prioritizes transit improvements over bicycles. And so that was a major change in the last update. And again, it'll also help support that future infill growth tool that the city is relying on with residential and employment growth.
Would you mind giving an example of what that looks like?
Yeah, absolutely. So, for example, like along the Alabama corridor, if there are major roadway projects, that might mean prioritizing transit improvements rather than a dedicated bike lane, especially if there are corridors directly adjacent to it that the bike facilities might be more suitable on. So it just gives the city a little bit more flexibility in providing improvements for transit services rather than a mode that might not be as suitable in that road type.
So the bikes would be a different parallel road.
Yep, exactly. Thank you. So moving on to what these enhanced GoLine features might look like. So there are 6 kind of buckets that we are looking at and have identified in the locally preferred alternative. The first one is the main goal and likely the item that most riders will be more aware of, and that's the ultimate goal of 10-minute service. So that's taking 15-minute frequency down to 10-minute frequency. In order to do that, we are looking at certain spot improvements, one of which is bus stop islands. So what this does is allow the bus to stop in lane rather than merging into the bus stop and potentially having a conflict with a bike lane and then saving time in merging back out into traffic. So this allows the bus to stop in lane and reduce that merging movements. And this is an example on Lincoln Street. You can see the bus lane the bike lane is striped there. It goes up on the curb, and then riders that are approaching the bus would just cross that bike lane. The next spot improvement is queue jump lanes. So this is a diagram of Lakeway and Lincoln Street. The bus currently, this is one of 2 existing queue jump lanes in Bellingham. It uses the right-hand turn pocket to access the stop. And then once it pulls away from the stop, there is a transit only light that will turn green a few seconds before the normal through lane turns green. And so that allows the bus to jump the queuing cars.
The other was James in Alabama. Right?
Yes, exactly. Yep. Another component of this project is looking at advanced technology for transit signal priority. So currently in our system, we have transit signal priority, but there's no evidence that it provides us with meaningful benefit for time savings. And so since that's been implemented, there's been a lot of advancements in technology. So we're working with the city right now, and I'll touch a little bit on the implementation side of it, but this is something that we're currently going forward with grant funding. And the city of Bellingham is actually the applicant for that, since it's City of Bellingham infrastructure. Another component to the project is tier 1 and tier 2 stops. Now, we've identified stop enhancements and categorized those in those 2 tiers. So tier 1, the image there is a rendering in the Barkley area. So this is Woburn, just north of the Rimland intersection. And so tier 1, we've identified as either or serving high ridership destinations and origins, or serving as important transfer points in our system. And so this stop could do both of those. So there are a number of routes that use the Barkley Village area, and this could operate as kind of a transfer point for those additional routes. It includes increased amenities like real-time signage, increased and enhanced shelters, additional lighting. There could be some bike parking to help that first mile, last mile connection. And then in addition to the tier 1 stops, we've also identified tier 2 stops, which is kind of our base level enhanced GO line stops. So this would mean that most, if not all, stops would have some sort of shelter, ADA boarding pad, trash can facilities. And so it's just providing that base level for all of the rest that aren't identified as tier 1 stop locations. In addition to that, we've also looked at bus stop balancing. So the intent here is to look at locations that make sense so that we're not having the bus slow down, every 500 feet. In our stop guidelines, we target quarter-mile stop spacing for that kind of ultimate balance between providing as much access as we can for riders and avoiding the bus slowing down every 500 feet or so. With this study, we were still targeting that about quarter-mile stop spacing. There are instances where it's a little bit higher, but this study allowed us to really look at bus stop locations that they make sense, as well as making sense so that we're able to implement those transit spot improvements as well. So if we're looking at an existing bus stop, but maybe a block further down, it might make more sense to implement a stop island in that location. We were able to kind of have some more wiggle room and look at that stop balancing and how it operates overall.
If we could spend a little moment talking about why bus stop balancing is important for this kind of project. Obviously, the more that you slow down and stop for a stop, the longer that route is going to take. And so the difficulty here is to balance the access and how long the walk is to a stop versus how speedy the bus can go from place to place. So we're really careful about where those stops are located. And in our system, many of the stops are closer than a quarter mile. They might be an eighth of a mile, which is a very close walking distance, right? And there are reasons why we have, in some locations, why we have that narrow spacing, but in many cases we can extend that spacing and therefore provide the benefit of a quicker service, right? And that's a large frustration of many riders that you're
I'm glad to hear that, because I spent a full year riding the bus. I gave up my car for a year, and 231 was my main route, and Alabama's just got stop after stop after stop. And it does seem to be too short a distance between.
And over years, we've just added more stop. We haven't removed much, but we just keep adding.
No, I mean, it's and then when you're followed in your car, it's just
And the other thing is the cost of maintaining those stops too. If we have shelters, if we have to put in pads, and that just adds to the cost of WTA, right?
So in like the gold line, how many stops currently do you have and how many do you project you might have if you do this?
Oh gosh,
I think it's 25.
that sounds right.
One might, don't quote me on the exact number, but I think it's 25, and we're defining. I think we're reducing that down by a half a dozen stops, and then we're talking about 8 tier 1 stops, and the rest would be tier 2 stops.
So in addition to those treatment types, this project will also help support the city's ongoing growth model in urban villages, but also look to the future in identifying what those transit corridors might look like. So the way that I think about this is kind of the urban villages are those anchor points, but we see everything between those anchor points as mostly lower density residential or commercial uses. And so with this infill growth tool, we can look at which corridors make sense, and the city can work to allow those higher density and mix of uses between those urban village corridor or urban village anchors. So this is a map of our system. This is not intended to be able to read any of the words, but the intention is just to show the general scale. So this is a visual of the scope and scale of these treatments. So this is our Go Line system map, and each of those little toothpicks on the map are individual locations of either transit spot improvements, transit signal priority, other improvements like access restrictions, things that will ultimately help reduce overall runtime along the corridors and allow us to be able to implement that higher frequency. And I can go back to this map if there are questions during the discussion as well. Let's move on from here. So just a brief discussion on the estimated time savings and costs through this locally preferred alternative. So as part of this exercise, we've estimated what that time savings might look like based on the previous map that I just showed. So the methodology there was to do some research and look into accepted average runtime savings based on treatment type, and then how many treatments per corridor. We've extrapolated that to travel time savings in minutes, sorry. So that estimated time savings is based on all of the proposed treatments. So this would be based on full implementation of those corridors. The cost to implement the methodology was similar. So we got an average cost per treatment that is a very rough order of magnitude cost estimate. And we've extrapolated that, and we've broken that out for short-term projects and long-term projects over the corridor. And that distinction between short-term and long-term is just based on what we felt comfortable with on available funding opportunities. And typically that is grant funding opportunities.
The cost, what percentage is city and what percentage is WTA? Do you know at all what the split would be?
So we haven't identified that specifically, and we'll touch a little bit on kind of the concept of the memorandum of understanding with the city. We didn't identify that on purpose so that we would have more flexibility, but ultimately have that goal to work together as two organizations. And I think a good example there is the transit signal priority grant funding opportunity that we're moving forward with the city of Bellingham. So that's done with WashDOT's regional mobility grant. And so city staff, WTA staff are working together. We've submitted a pre-application package for that, but implementation would look like a partnership with that. So we would identify grant funding opportunities, and in this instance, the city of Bellingham is the applicant because it's their infrastructure. But it would ultimately look like a partnership and implementation, and a lot of those grant funding opportunities have required matches associated with them. So I believe it'll be more project by project, but we'll work out how we implement that over time.
And does that include the cost of the incremental buses we need and the labor to run?
That does not include
These are
operational
only the
costs.
capital
Yeah,
costs.
this is capital costs.
Okay.
Yep.
And we didn't define the operational costs because, as you might recall, we had that service allocation conversation.
Yes.
And so that the initial direction for the board was, can you shift some hours over to cover at least some of the initial frequency portion? So there's that dynamic as well. But I think long term, we recognize there may be some outside funding needed to fully implement this project, or we're not going to be able to do it just by grants alone. So I think that's the reality of the project.
All right, so moving on to next step. So as part of publishing the and releasing the final version of the locally preferred alternative, staff did some additional outreach. And so we did tabling events at our downtown Bellingham station, Cordata station, Western, and some additional tabling events. And as part of that, we posed a few survey questions and people we've talked to, and we directed those people to fill out these questions. And so the first one just gives us kind of a general overview of support of the locally preferred alternative. So as you can see, for the most part, there is generally supportive feelings about the locally preferred alternative. That second one, generally supportive. When we did tabling events, we were talking with people, and what I categorize that as people that are in favor of the outcome, but might have some thoughts on either like bus stop balancing or treatment types or things like that. We talked with a lot of people that were focused. Oh, okay, sorry, I'll move along. The second question looked at the outcomes that matter most to respondents. And so we looked at faster and more reliable trips and more frequent buses. And then the third question really was gauging input on making those targeted street changes. And so kind of making that short-term sacrifice for the long-term benefit of transit service. You can see most of the respondents there. So next steps and schedule, we're before you today for adoption of the LPA. We are also going to the Bellingham City Council for adoption on April 27th. And then the last two there are just grant funding opportunities. I touched a little bit on the regional mobility grant. There's also a bus and bus facilities grant through WashDOT that we'll be targeting in the fall for tier 1 and potentially tier 2 stop upgrades as well. And so again, that'll be partnership with the city of Bellingham.
And those don't fund everything, those are just aspects.
Correct, yep. And just touching very quickly, I know it's not for consideration today, but the memorandum of understanding is that agreement and method of working together with the city of Bellingham for project coordination, evaluating prioritization, and outlining those roles and responsibilities for implementation. And with that, I'll hand it back to the chair for discussion as well.
All right, can we get people back on the screen?
Can you close out your presentation?
All right, Mayor Lund.
Thank you for that great presentation. I've had a chance to preview it, and I know it was touched on, but I think it's worth re-emphasizing what a partnership this is with the city and how committed I am as mayor and how committed our public works and transportation team are to this. It was mentioned how much work has gone on behind the scenes to get to this moment, and I really appreciate the strengthening of the collaboration between the city and WTA to get here. And, you know, when you look at that infrastructure changes map, it's a tremendous commitment by the city to move forward with this project, but it's the right commitment. You know, our tagline is connecting people to opportunity. And we only realize, you know, our mission is only possible when people get on the bus. And these will be investments that will help a whole many more people in our community get on the bus. So I'm excited that we're here right now and get to consider investing in this rapid transit project for our community.
Go ahead.
Thank you. That was an amazing presentation, really helpful as well as a new board member to kind of get a foundation of where things are heading. With balancing the stops, what is the longest mileage to a stop that's been created? So generally having like the 8 km/h mile and balancing, what would maybe be the longest distance then that we've increased for somebody to get to a stop?
Are you talking about in context of this particular project? Yeah, I think we have a few stops that are over a quarter mile, but there's nothing that's beyond. And there's conditions like, operating on a state highway, for example, that might mean that stops are a little bit further apart, but generally they're about a quarter mile. Yeah, I think we measured it, and on average it's about a quarter mile.
Yeah, go ahead. With the incremental implementation timeline, I know, a lot of that has variables, especially like funding sources as well. Is there any sort of like high level look about like, here's what we'd like to see this roll out in this many years or across this timeline? Is there any estimate to that?
Yeah, you want to
Yeah, so with this kind of goes in coordination with the service allocation discussion that the board has been having as well. And so with potential service changes, we're looking at targeting potential frequency introduction in 28. It might be a little bit after that as well. We're looking at potentially with grant funding and the tier 1 improvements in Bartley Village construction by potentially fall of 28. So
I'll just also mention that within this project, we prioritize the gold go line for improvements. And we're taking an incremental approach to any of the improvements, depending on when funding is available and opportunity. So gold line's a priority. However, we're also making investments in other locations. For example, the blue go line through campus, as you know, we're doing our service changes in the summer, so we'll be able to have some enhancements there. We're changing stop locations, so we're beginning to implement over time. So you may see different things change over time, depending on the quarter, depending on the funding opportunities. But for the purpose of grant application, the gold line is going to be our priority at this point.
I guess in my mind, doing nothing won't get us anywhere. This is the best option we have on the table. So I'm going to move we approve the locally preferred alternative.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor of implementing the LPA, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Excellent. That passes. Thank you.
Just, this is one line of effort in WTA's overall strategy. So this ties with the service allocation framework. It ties with the public market. It ties with the support of development, both economic development and actual development that's happening in housing. And so this is one line of effort, but it's connected to all these other lines of effort that we have going to meet those objectives and get those outcomes. So thank you for doing that.
I did have one question, but now there was a slide that showed 19 million on the gold line and then 28 million. 2 questions on that. One is that incremental or each? So is there a $19 million cost and then a $28 million cost, or is that a 19 and then another 9 to get to 20?
that would be a 19 and a 28. So those are individual projects, either slated for short term or long term.
The total project is like 40
Have full implementation.
And okay, so how long do you think it would take to spend that 47 million? I mean, is this 5 years, 10 years?
This is a long period of time. Yeah. I mean, some of this are in, I think included in study, like we're at the study level.
Sure.
For example, Sandwich Way, we couldn't figure out the improvements that were needed. It's too complex to figure out. So I think a lot of that cost is embedded in a huge unknown type of improvement that could be very significant, right?
Okay.
So there's, that's a very, very rough number.
And I will say those estimates are based on individual projects. And so with implementation, we can piggyback on, other capital projects that the city's working on. So that would cut down on like mobilization costs. Things like that.
Now you gotta get the engineer. If they're that rough, then don't give us numbers to the 100.
Yeah, that's right.
Maybe to the 10,000
Point.
or 100,000.
Point well taken.
Big brown.
Yeah.
All right, thank you. E3, consideration of contract award for transit advertising services.
Miranda, that was such a great presentation. I feel like the guy who had to follow the Beatles on the Ed Sullivan show. I am so excited to present this contract for your consideration. It's very indicative of the strategies procurement uses to get best value and to be good stewards of public money despite the procurement method. Last week, I brought you a cooperative for these items that we buy that are just general commodities. This contract's a little different. It's the opposite. It's a sole source. There's only one vendor capable of providing this service to WTA. That's because of our market area, transit advertising. We still do our due diligence. We still do market research. We still look for opportunities to negotiate, even though there's only one. It's like the conversations. And we did find room to negotiate, and we got some more favorable pricing for the agency. I'm very excited about that. And here it is.
Thank you. Questions, comments?
That was the Mick Jagger.
Motion?
I move approval of the contract award for transit advertising services.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, that passes. Thank you. Item F, consent agenda.
Move approval. Second.
No, right. Everyone is in. All right, all those in favor of approving the consent agenda, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, item G, other business.
One thing, just as a heads up, Jen, Maureen, and I will be in Washington DC for the American Public Transportation Association Legislative Conference on the 16th. We'll be participating, but it'll be like Jen. So just wanted to make sure.
Any other business? Announcements? We're adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.